Special teams, look, in my last video where I talked about the recap of the game, I went off on the special teams coordinator. I stand by everything I said about Mike Prefer. I think there's an adjustment that needs to be made there. I think there's been enough time to evaluate this and know that he's not doing a good job and has not done a good job. And look, if things don't change sooner than later, and I don't believe they will because these have been problems for 3 years, then somebody got to go. I was watching the 1 o'clock window of games today, and it brought me back to a conversation that I was having with you all in the off season, and that is about strength of schedule and our tendency to overrate strength of schedule because we're assuming that every team we're playing is going to be playing their absolute best at the moment that we play them, or going to be playing to their absolute potential. And what I think today proved was kind of what I've been saying, was any type of strength of schedule debate before the season is always pointless, right? You know, I think before the season, we were looking at a team like the Chargers as untouchable. They're down 14 points as I record this video to the Jaguars. The Patriots, a lot of us didn't think that was a winnable game. Watch what they did against Baltimore today, or what they didn't do against Baltimore today, and then tell me that game's unwinnable even with Jacoby Brissett. The Baltimore Ravens, you can say that they're really good, and they are really good, but they also blew a 20-point lead in the fourth quarter. They're definitely beatable. The Bengals are 1-2. They're definitely beatable. I mean, they got beat by the Jets. I mean, not the Jets. We got beat by the Jets. They got beat by the Steelers, who the Browns beat already. And they got beat by, who they get? Oh, the Cowboys, right? Two teams that aren't necessarily known as that good. The Bills fumbled a game away against the Dolphins. The Buccaneers have been looking okay, but they ain't been looking like how they usually look. And then the Texans, like, that's all the teams that the Browns play. All of a sudden, right, in this Jacoby Brissett stretch, all of a sudden, all of those teams don't look as threatening as they did 4 months ago, because we have this tendency to overrate teams in the offseason. Let's talk about the AFC West real quick, right? One of the best divisions in football. Everybody was telling me how great this division is going to be. The Raiders look bad. The Broncos look worse, even though they have a win. I feel like the Broncos are a worse coach team. The Chargers look okay, but they're still the Chargers, having a lot of injuries, a lot of misfortune. And then the Chiefs look all right. The Chiefs look all right, but they just lost to the Colts, who don't look that good. You know what I mean? We overrate these conferences so much in the offseason. We overrate every team so much in the offseason. And we tell ourselves that a team like the Browns is going to be starting a quote-unquote backup quarterback in Jacoby Brissett has no shot, because look how tough the AFC is. But usually, almost all the time, it ends up like this. Think about that the next time we're talking about how the Browns' schedule is impossible, or whenever we're crying and whenever the schedule comes out in May about how tough the schedule is. Just remember that. Just put this one in your back pocket, right? The schedule's never as tough as you make it out to be. It's never as tough as it's made out to be in the summer. And it's never as easy as it's made out to be in the summer. Teams get good at certain points of the year. Teams get bad. The schedule is the schedule. That's all the schedule is. But that's my little rant on the schedule. Now let's talk about how everything broke down, how this shakes out, how this all affects the Browns. Right now, the Browns, I think, are the 3rd seed in the AFC. They would be the 1 seed if they would have won against the Jets, but I'm going to just leave that point alone. But right now, I think what the Ravens won this week, because the Patriots are terrible. And I believe the Bengals did win over the Jets. So both teams won. The Bengals are still in last place. The Steelers are in 3rd place now, and I believe that brings the Ravens up to 2nd place and the Browns in 1st. Both teams at 2-1. Browns get the tiebreaker over the Ravens. because of the division game that the Browns won, right? Ravens have not played a division game yet. When do the Ravens play a division game? The Ravens probably play a division game, I think, in a couple of weeks. But until then, until they win a division game, if the record is the same for the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens, then it will remain that day. They play the Bills and then they play the Bengals. So we'll see. We'll see. So right now the Browns are in first place. I want to do a little bit of a state of the Browns address real quick. I'm just talking about some things on the team that I think are encouraging through the first 3 weeks of the season, and some things on the team that I feel like are a bit discouraging through the first 3 weeks of the season. We'll start with the good first. Encouraging, obviously, Jacoby Brissett, this passing game. And it's not just Jacoby Brissett. I want to make sure I added the passing game in this analysis because it wasn't just Jacoby that was taking a lot of flack in the offseason. It was the entire pass catchers, right? Like we were talking about receivers. We needed to add this dude who don't get no playing time in this team. Like we thought that we had a bottom of the barrel receiving bunch, and some people thought we had a bottom of the barrel quarterback situation. Turns out that Jacoby Brissett's all right. Right? I think he's played about what my expectations were. Now that my expectations were a lot higher than most people's initial expectations for Jacoby Brissett, but he's playing about where I expected him to, maybe even a little bit above. And then when it comes to the wide receiving core, I think they've exceeded my expectations. I didn't have a lot of expectations. I thought separation would be a problem for this team. It is not. Like, not even remotely. It's hilariously not a problem, separation for this team. So, offensively, I think the Cleveland Browns look really good. I mean, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, they're exceeding my expectations only because they're having, like, Nick Chubb's having, he looks like he's going to have an all-time year. I don't know if it's going to be a record-breaking year because he doesn't get the carries, but some of those averages and the efficiency numbers this year, I promise you, are on track probably to be history breaking. So offense has exceeded my expectations in all three levels: running, passing, quarterback, all of that. Blocking. I think they've been much better offensively than I thought they would be. And that's credit to Kevin Stefanski. I know people give Kevin flack because, he doesn't hold himself on the sideline like certain people want him to, or maybe people have issues with his play calling at times, but I think he's proven it. Like, throughout the years, whenever his back's against the wall and he has to go out there with the Case Keenum, or he has to go out there with Jacoby, or the injury to Baker Mayfield last year really kind of muffed things up and made things questionable. But how he's bounced back from that. And we saw signs of this when he had those two games with Case Keenum that he won last year. And the one game he almost won with Nick Mullins, even though I don't know, was he coaching that game? I'm not 100% sure. There was like a COVID outbreak that week. But we saw trickets of this, of that the offense is fine. With certain numbers too, the open receiver percentage was very high for this team last year, as it is this year. And we saw trickets of this last year. We just didn't know who to blame fully yet, whether it was the quarterback or the play calling. It's looking more and more as each day goes on that it was the quarterback that was here last year, and some of his faults in not fitting the offense or not trusting the offense. More so than it was the offense itself, because it just looks like this offense works. Now we'll see. It's very early in the season. We're only talking about 3 games, but I think that has been something that has been proven. It was very tumultuous last year. This is far from tumultuous. Speaking of tumultuous, let's talk about the defense. The defense, it sucks to say this. If we're looking at this just like in the big picture of things, the defense hasn't been as bad as we feel about it. But the fact is that the defense has had like 6 plays that are terrible in 6 situations where you can't have those plays, right? Because if you look at it percentage-wise, like how many good plays versus bad plays this defense had, they've had a lot more good possessions than they had bad this year defensively. The problem is that the bad possessions happen at the precise wrong time to have the bad possessions. Maybe that's luck, and that'll figure itself out. Maybe it's something they're coaching. Sure. I would like to see Denzel bounce back into form. He does this every year, but I would like to see it. I want to see Grant be more confident about where he's supposed to be out there. Every time he's there, it's like he's arguing with somebody about where the placement should be. I want to see everybody have that confidence of where they're supposed to be, so we see less of that. Obviously, Anthony Walker going down hurts. Jacob Phillips will step in. The good news about that is that Jacob, he's had time to work in there. Defensive line wise, look, when Clowney and Miles are out there, they're good. But when Clowney and or Miles aren't out there, they're not a good unit. I mean, we knew this coming into it. We knew this 2 years ago. We know this now. They need more. They need a couple of guys in the interior to step up, and they need another edge guy to step up. Alex Wright looks like he's on his way to doing that. But we need Perion Winfrey, Tommy Togiai, Jordan Elliott's been fine, or Taven Bryant. Like, we need another one of those guys to emerge at some point in the year if we want to have competent defensive line play, regardless of who's out there or not, or regardless if you have both Clowney and Miles, right? Like, we can't live like that on the defensive line. We saw what happens when Clowney isn't in there. Teams aren't forced to play you honestly, and that leaves Miles in a precarious situation where he's getting everything rolled away from him in triple team dog game. So that's something you want to stay away from. That's something they had to learn from. Special teams, look, in my last video where I talked about the recap of the game, I went off on the special teams coordinator. I stand by everything I said about Mike Prefer. I think there's an adjustment that needs to be made there. I think there's been enough time to evaluate this and know that he's not doing a good job and has not done a good job. And look, if things don't change sooner than later, and I don't believe they will because these have been problems for 3 years, then somebody got to go. Now, I don't know if they got a replacement, somebody feel confident in. Maybe Callie could be the replacement. She's been there for a while. But somebody got to step up because, we could have somebody from Twitter coach the special teams and they would do stuff that makes more sense than what happens here. Straight up. It's been that bad. So, other than that, I feel like Kevin's been great. But there are some questions with his other coordinators that need to be answered. And ultimately, Kevin has to be the one to fix that, right? That's going to be a critical part of Kevin's tenure because even if he's a great offensive mind and a great offensive head coach, if he allows himself to be held back for his entire tenure as a head coach by subpar coordinators, then that's going to reflect poorly on him. So he needs to do something about that. Eventually. Now, I don't expect them to do it in the middle of the season. That's not how the Browns want to operate anymore. But I do think something gets done probably at the end of this year. We'll see how the season shakes out, right? If this becomes a disaster, something's got to get done. It's not at that point yet, but there are a couple teams, especially on special teams, where I'm like, this might be a mid-season situation. So I would keep an eye out on that because it has been close to a disaster on special teams. But that's really the state of the Browns. Browns are 2-1. They go into Atlanta next week. And that's a game that they feel like they can win. Atlanta's a good team. They're winless as of recording this video, but I think they played better than the record reflects. The Chargers after that might feel like more of a winnable game than it did a couple weeks ago. The Patriots, that definitely feels like more of a winnable game than it did 2 months ago. The Ravens, after that, it's going to be a tough one, right? Division opponent, the Bengals at home. Historically, the Browns do well against the Bengals, but we'll see. That Dolphins game, though, that's one that switched up on us, right? I was looking at that Dolphins game as a winnable one, but the way that the Dolphins are playing might be difficult. But it's a rookie head coach on the road. Well, he's not on the road. He's at home. That Bills game, look, the Bills are a very good team, but they're a beatable team. They proved that got proven today. And in the Buccaneers, again, Tom Brady, all of that. But they haven't been that same Bucs team in a while. So we'll see what happens for the rest of this year. But this is just my reminder. The next time it's May and the schedule comes out and you're inclined to panic because you think this schedule is the toughest schedule of all time, don't. Because we always do this and it always ends up being much different than what we expect because in the NFL, things move all over the course of the year. Teams are good at certain points. Teams are bad at certain points. Teams regress. Teams impress. It just happens. It's the NFL. the schedule is the schedule. That's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.